Good afternoon, everyone. Let us start. Remember, we have been learning chapter 16, biodiversity and conservation. Now I shall present my screen. Now we shall read about importance of biodiversity. That is, what are the roles of biodiversity. So let us read. Biodiversity has contributed in many ways to the development of human culture, and in turn human communities have played a major role in shaping the diversity of nature at the genetic, species, and ecological levels. Hence, biodiversity plays the following roles: ecological role, economic roles, and scientific roles. Okay, so here we are going to analyze the significance of biodiversity or the usefulness of biodiversity. Okay, so the first one is about ecological role of biodiversity. So species of many kinds perform some function or other in an ecosystem. Each and every organisms, okay, each and every species in the ecosystem perform some function or other, okay, in an ecosystem, and nothing in an ecosystem evolves and sustains without any reason. So that means every organism in the ecosystem, okay, sustains with a reason. Okay, that means every organism in the ecosystem has its own significance, has its own usefulness, and it is performing its own useful function in the ecosystem. Okay, that means every organism, beside extracting its needs, also contributes something of useful to other organisms. So in an ecosystem, every organism, okay, after extracting its needs, okay, say for example after getting food from the ecosystem, the same organism is also contributing something useful to the other organisms. Okay, and even the human beings also contribute, okay, to the sustenance of ecosystem. And these species capture and store energy, produce and decompose organic materials, then help to cycle water and nutrients throughout the ecosystem. So these are the important functions or the roles of these species in the ecosystem. Okay, remember we're learning about the these ecological role of biodiversity. Okay, and here these roles of species in the ecosystem is given here. Species in the ecosystem capture and store energy. Okay, capture energy from the sunlight from the sun and store energy in the ecosystem, and it is transferred from one level to another level, then produce and decompose other organic materials. Okay, for example bacteria, okay, decompose other organic material, the dead bodies, and thus helping, okay, in maintaining the fertility of the soil, for example. Then help to cycle water and nutrients throughout the ecosystem. About this we have learned about these biogeochemical cycles in the previous chapter. Okay, then fixed atmospheric gases, for example say some kind of bacteria, like rhizobium, which is found in the nodules of legumes, okay, can fix this free nitrogen from the atmosphere into the soil, and thus is available for use by the other organisms, by the plants and the other organisms. And the species also help regulate the climate. Okay, so these are the different usefulness or the roles of the species in the ecosystem, or in other words, these are the functions of ecosystem. Okay, and here these functions are important for ecosystem function and the human survival. All these are required, okay, for the human survival and the survival of the other organisms. The more diverse in an ecosystem, better are the chances of species to survive through diversities and attacks, and consequently is more productive. That means diversity is an ecosystem is very good. Okay, the more diverse an ecosystem, better are the chances of species to survive through adversities and attack, and consequently is more productive. So diversity in an ecosystem is very important for the survival of the species. Okay, when there is adversities, okay, and attacks, and consequently when there is diversity in ecosystem, it is more productive. Okay, and hence loss of species would decrease the availability of the system to maintain itself. Okay, and just like a species with a high genetic diversity, an ecosystem with high biodiversity may have a greater chance of adapting to environmental change. Okay, just like a species with high genetic diversity, in case of species with high genetic diversity, okay, so it can resist to different diseases. Likewise, an ecosystem with high biodiversity may have a greater chance of adapting to the environmental change, for example, adapting to the climate change. In other words, the more the variety of species in an ecosystem, the more stable in the ecosystem is likely to be. Okay, if there are more varieties of species in an ecosystem, then the ecosystem will be stable. So these are the ecological roles of this biodiversity. Okay, significance of biodiversity in the ecosystem. Okay, clear or not? Any question? Okay, if you don't have, then the next role of biodiversity is the economic role of biodiversity. Okay, for all humans, biodiversity is an important resource in their day-to-day life. Okay, for the human beings, biodiversity is an important resource for day-to-day life. Means we are getting a lot of useful things, including food, okay, and daily use item from the biodiversity. And one important part of biodiversity is the crop diversity, and which is also called agro biodiversity. And biodiversity is seen as a reservoir of resources to be drawn upon for the manufacture of food, pharmaceutical, and cosmetic products. Okay, that means from the biodiversity we get different useful things. Okay, like items for manufacture of food, then items, okay, for the manufacture of medicines and other cosmetic products. Okay, all these are the raw materials, okay, for the manufacture of this food, then medicines, then cosmetic items are getting from the this biodiversity. And this concept of biological resources is responsible for the deterioration of biodiversity. That means when human beings think biodiversity as a resource, at that time this biodiversity is also lost. Okay, so when we think biodiversity as a resource, and if human beings are not exploiting it properly, then there will be deterioration of the biodiversity. That means that biodiversity will be lost. Okay, and some important economic commodities that biodiversity supplies to humankind are food crops, then livestock, forest, fish, medicinal resources, as discussed in the previous lines. Okay, some important commodities supplied by biodiversity to the human beings are food crops, then livestock, that is the animals. The domesticated animals are also from the this biodiversity. That means we domesticated the wild animals, after selecting the useful one. Then we get products, different byproducts from the forest. Then we get fish, we get medicinal resources. All these are supplied by the biodiversity. So in this way, biodiversity is very useful to the human beings. And next we have the scientific role of biodiversity. So biodiversity is important because each species can give us some clue as how life evolved and will continue to evolve. So biodiversity is important scientifically because each species can give us some clue as how life evolved and will continue to evolve. So after examining the species in the ecosystem, we can understand how life was evolved, how life was originated, and how life has been changing and will continue to change. All this will be known by the human beings after analyzing those species. And biodiversity also helps in understanding how life functions and the role of each species in sustaining ecosystem of which we are also a species. See here, biodiversity also helps in understanding how life functions and the role of each species in sustaining the ecosystem. What is the role of these, for example, bees, insects in the ecosystem, for example. So insects and bees help in cross-pollinating the plants, and in that way we are getting fruits and nuts. So this is an example. And so that means every species in the ecosystem functions some useful things, and likewise human beings also performing useful tasks in the ecosystem. And from this we have known that it is our ethical responsibility to consider that each and every species along with us have an intrinsic right to exist. Since every species is performing such useful tasks in the ecosystem, each and every species along with us have an intrinsic right to exist in the ecosystem. All the animals, all the birds, all the insects in the ecosystem also have the right to live. Since they are performing some useful tasks, without which the ecosystem, the biodiversity will be lost. And hence it is morally wrong to voluntarily cause the extinction of any species. That means we have to conserve this biodiversity. The level of biodiversity is a good indicator of the state of our relationship with other living species. If the biodiversity is degraded, that tells that there is negative relationship between these human beings and the other living species. And if the biodiversity is conserved, if there is if the biodiversity is reached, that indicates that there is a very good relationship between the human beings and the other living species. So in this way, biodiversity, okay, functions a useful tasks. Okay, so these are about the importance or the significance of biodiversity. Clear or not? Any question from your side? And here, so importance of biodiversity is also can also be summarized as follows. Okay, let's see here. And so this diagram shows, okay, all the species in the ecosystem, and all these species are performing useful tasks, okay, in the ecosystem. Like this, we have this genetic diversity. Then species are protecting freshwater resources, speed recovery from natural disasters, maintaining balance of the ecosystem, sustainability and growth, okay, provision of food security, adaptation to different habitats, okay, then provision of biological resources, promote soil formation and protection. All these are the roles of the species, okay, in the ecosystem. Maintain food chain in the nature. Then next we have this another topic, okay. So before we start the loss of biodiversity, do you have any question? Just now we have learned the significance or the importance of biodiversity to the human beings, okay. And so this about the loss of biodiversity, okay, it can be summarized as follows, okay. But before we start, let us learn what is exotic species, okay. Exotic species, exotic, you know, it means foreign. See here, species which are not the natural inhabitants of the local habitat but are introduced into the system are called exotic species. Species which are not the natural inhabitants of local habitat. For example, in our jungle, okay, in the Churchandpur district, if a species, okay, from other areas, not from this area, okay, from other countries, for example, is introduced in the forest of this Churchandpur district, that species is known as exotic species. That means foreign, okay. And about the loss of biodiversity, we are representing in this way, okay. Here we shall read in this way: factors responsible for the loss of biodiversity. So what are the causes for the loss of biodiversity? Let us read. Number one factor is the rapid population growth, okay. So growth in human population has increased the rate of consumption of natural resources. It has accelerated the loss of species and habitation in different parts of the world. So number one cause for the loss of biodiversity is the rapid growth of population, increase in the population, okay, in the world. And growth in the human population has increased the rate of utilizing the natural resources, rate of consumption of the natural resources. And because of this, okay, loss of species and habitation, that is forest, in different parts of the world is accelerated, okay, has been increasing. And another point is that, okay, another factor is that over exploitation of the resources. Over exploitation of the resources and deforestation okay, have become rampant to fulfill the needs of large population. The destruction of natural habitats have proved disasters for the entire biosphere. Okay, due to increase in the population of the human beings, okay, there has been over exploitation of the resources, overutilization of resources, and deforestation, okay, to fulfill the needs of the growing population. And that is why natural habitats of okay, of the certain species have been destructed. Next, we have natural calamities. Natural calamities such as earthquake, flood, volcanic eruption, forest fires, droughts, etc. cause damage to the flora and the fauna of the earth, bringing change in the biodiversity of respective affected regions. Okay, sometimes not by the human beings but by the natural processes like natural calamities, okay, such as earthquakes, flood, volcanic eruption, forest fire, droughts, also cause damage to the plants and animals of the earth, okay, bringing the change of the biodiversity of respective affected regions. For example, in an area, if there is a volcanic eruption, then that lava will burn everything, and thus that biodiversity is a loss. Okay. And next we have environmental pollution. Pesticides and other pollutants such as hydrocarbons and the toxic heavy metals destroy the weak and the sensitive species. Okay, pollution also causes the loss of biodiversity. For example, we are using pesticides in the agricultural fields, okay, then we are polluting the environment, okay, by way of combustion. So when we burn coal, petroleum, then these hydrocarbons and other carbon dioxide and other okay, gases and the toxic heavy metals are released from the factories, and all this destroy the weak and the sensitive species in the ecosystem. And number E, introduction of alien species, that is exotic. Okay, just now we have learned about exotic. It is also known as alien species. And natural biotic community, okay, of the ecosystem suffered extensive damage because of introduction of exotic species. If we introduce a foreign species in an ecosystem, then the ecosystem will be affected. Okay, so for example, species like lantana, okay, species like lantana that grow extensively in the Western Ghats create a mat-like structure leading to degradation and the destruction of biodiversity. As a result, herbivores like gaur, chital, and sambar are deprived of their food. Okay, see here in the Western Ghats, species like lantana. Here, okay, lantana grow extensively in the Western Ghats, and these species create mat-like structure, leading to the degradation and the destruction of the biodiversity. And because of this mat-like structure, okay, the herbivores like gaur, chital, and sambar are not able to get their food. Okay, then the last factor is hunting and poaching. Okay, illegal hunting and the selling of the animals, wild animals, and the other forest products. So during the last few decades, some animals like tigers, elephants, rhinoceros, crocodile, mink, and bird have hunted mercilessly by poachers. Okay, for their horn, tuxes, height, etc. And it has resulted in rendering of certain types of organisms as endangered category. Okay, so because of the hunting and poaching, some of the species are going to be extinct or are to be categorized as endangered category. Okay, so these are the factors or the causes for the loss of biodiversity, and it has been summarized from this textbook. Okay, so this is your textbook, and from here the causes for the loss of biodiversity has been summarized. Okay, and it also can be diagrammatically represented in this way. Okay, so it is presenting in this way by this Encyclopedia Britannica. And see here, see here we have influencers here. Okay, just we have influencers. Just see here, we have influencers. That means who are the influencers? Well, we have this human population growth. Human beings are one of the important, okay, influencers. Human population growth, and because of growth in the human population, there will be increase in the consumption of the national resources and reduce resource efficiency. The national resources will be exploited, depleted. Okay, and because of this, okay, see here, there will be habitat loss. Okay, number one, there will be habitat loss. That means habitat, you know, the home for the animals. There will be thinning, then fragmenting, outright destruction of the ecosystem, plant, soil, hydrologic, and neutral resources. Then there may be invasive species. Okay, any non-native, that is exotic, okay, species that significantly modifies, disrupts the ecosystem it colonizes. This is about introduction of the alien species in a habitat. Then here we have another cause for the loss of biodiversity, that is overexploitation. Okay, process of harvesting too many aquatic or terrestrial animals, which depletes the stock of some species while driving the others extinction. Means the hunting and the killing of the animals will lead to the extinction of some animals and birds. Okay, then pollution, another factor for the loss of biodiversity. Addition of any substance or any form of energy to the environment at a rate faster than it can be rendered, okay, harmless. That means pollution, as we learned earlier, pollution is also one of the factors for the loss of biodiversity. Climate change associated with the global warming. Okay, see, modification of the earth climate associated with rising levels of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, for example, in the atmosphere over the past 2 centuries also lead to the degradation of the biodiversity. Okay, and because of this loss of biodiversity, again it affects here. Okay, just see here, because of those factors there will be loss of biodiversity. Okay, and so hence there will be reduction in the number of genes, then there will be reduction in the individual organisms, there will be decline in the number of individual organisms, there will be decline in the number of species. Okay, there will be decline in the ecosystem diversity in a given area. Okay, these are the effects of biodiversity loss. Okay, so are you clear? Any question from your side? Okay, if you don't have questions, then let us stop here for today. Thank you very much for joining my class.